What's up, guys? Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for joining me. Another episode of MMA After Dark. Guys, UFC 319 just wrapped up. A lot to go over from the main card. I'm going to go over all the action on the main card from UFC 319 live from Chicago. Guys, before we get started though, please, if you'd be so kind, tap that like button, hit that subscribe button. Doesn't cost you a thing and it sure means a whole lot to me. Thank you to those of you that have already subscribed and liked my videos. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here on this very, very late Saturday night. So guys, UFC 319 just wrapped up. A lot of good fights. Fights got started off with a bang. We had a lot of finishes, some great fights on the main card, and then we get to the main event, which there was a lot leading up to that fight. Khamzat Chimaev, the new champion now, against Dricus du Plessis. I'm going to get to all of that, guys. I'm going to get to the co-main event and then every fight on the main card before that. So let's get right to it, guys. So opening the main card, we had Tim Elliott versus Kaya Sakura. This one for me, guys, going into the fight, really challenging for me to pick because, we had a guy, Kaya Sakura, coming over from Ryzen, got an immediate title shot against the champion Pantoja, and to be honest, he showed some ability, but it didn't look great. It wasn't his best performance. Pantoja cracked him on the feet, and then of course we know he ultimately got the finish rear naked choke in the second round, I believe. Right, so you kind of had to dissect that in terms of what it meant for his next fight, right? Like more of ability wise, right? But not a ton to take away from from his debut. And then, of course, he has an interesting opponent in Tim Elliott, a grizzled veteran, a guy that's been around the game a long time, a scrappy guy, a guy that's going to just kind of keep pressing forward, and a guy that's, just going to take damage and just continue to grind and, hopefully get victories. But initially, this was really hard for me to pick. Because you had to think that Kaya Sakura was going to have the advantage on the feet, particularly with the speed, the striking, the kickboxing, right? And we saw that. We saw that in the first two rounds until we know how it ended. Elliott ultimately got the submission victory. But before that, particularly in that first round, Kaya Sakura having a lot of success on the feet. He was striking at distance. He was pretty much doing whatever he wanted to him on the feet. Tim Elliott, kept pressing forward, and he was trying to give him some different looks with some weird feints and some weird movements and all kinds of different things going on with his hand and his movements, and it really wasn't doing a whole lot for him initially, and you had to think that if Kaya Sakura could continue to manage that distance and continue that striking, he was going to come away with the victory. And then at the end of that first round, I believe, Kaya Sakura threw a kick that Tim Elliott caught and then was able to turn that into a takedown. And then, we kind of saw that last minute, Tim Elliott has some success on the ground. And then going into that second round, you had to think, okay, now, if Tim Elliott is able to replicate that, get him to the ground, he could have some success there. Because I don't know about you guys, but when he was able to take Asakura down at the end of that first round, even though Asakura clearly won that first round, Kaya Sakura did not look comfortable down there. He looked very out of his element. He looked very just kind of confused, very uncomfortable. And so, you had to think, and, if you're Tim Elliott, you're thinking, okay, now, if I can find a way to get this guy to the ground, he's in my world now, we can, figure something out. We can maybe come away with a finisher or get some damage at the very least, maybe turn the fight in his favor. So, we get into the second round, and, Kaya Sakura was, doing his thing, trying to manage distance, landing strikes, and Tim Elliott gets a beautifully timed takedown as Kaya Sakura went in to throw a hook. Tim Elliott maneuvered around it, shot that double leg takedown, beautifully timed, and got him on the back. And eventually was able to work into a guillotine choke. But I was really impressed because there was a moment where in that takedown, he was looking to secure the guillotine and then, lock up the legs. And, he lost position, but then what does he do, right? He doesn't panic, right? He doesn't just say, okay, I'm just going to, take it up to the feet again and then, try to, get him down somehow again, work into the takedown. He stays calm, he adjusts, he he keeps the choke in, and he ends up full mount, and it loses the grip on occasion, but again, just stays composed, doesn't panic, sinks in that guillotine with full mount, and really just starts applying that pressure. And again, once Kaya Sakura was on his back, he just looked so uncomfortable. And moving forward, that is going to be a concern for Kaya Sakura. As far as matchmaking, they're going to definitely probably want to match him with predominantly like a striker, because now he's faced back-to-back guys that are primarily wrestling, grappling guys, jiu-jitsu guys. So Tim Elliott comes away with that finish. Really impressive, because Asakura was landing heavy shots in that first round, but wasn't doing a whole lot with the body. Was really headhunting a lot. And Tim Elliott, I think said it after the fact. Hey, if you're just gonna headhunt with me, hey, I'm gonna walk through that. And unless you find a way to get me out of there, I'm gonna find a way to work through that and press forward and continue to get in your face, continue to work some sort of a takedown, and that's exactly what he did. So hats off to Tim Elliott. This was a good win for him. He a very unorthodox guy, right? Kind of pretty goofy with the movements, but he came away with the victory. Impressive stuff from Tim Elliott. He survived the early onslaught of heavy strikes from Asakura. He did not panic. He did not throw in the towel on himself. He stayed committed to his game. He looked for those openings for the takedowns. He got it. He submitted Kaya Sakura. Impressive stuff from him. So he moves on. He retains his 11th ranking, and we'll see what happens from there. Kaya Sakura came in ranked 15, which I'll get to that a little bit later about how I kind of feel about that, because I have a feeling that another unranked guy is going to get a ranking off of a loss on this same card. But Tim Elliott retains his ranking and is going to move on. He's going to continue to make some noise and be in relevant fights, probably within the top 10 for quite a while. So hats off to Tim Elliott. Great win for him. We move on, guys. Michael Venom Page versus Jared Cannonier. Michael Venom Page, is there a guy that comes in with more confidence, swagger, style, that coolness factor than Michael Venom Page? He is in complete belief of his capabilities, and at no point does he feel any need to abandon a game plan or anything like that, right? To go out of his element, to try different things. He knows what he's good at, and it's very effective. Very unorthodox for the UFC. Not a lot of guys with that style. The closest thing we have is probably Wonder Boy, right, with that karate kind of point style. But even his style, very different than Wonder Boy's. But in the first round, we saw Michael Venom Page. He started cracking Jared Cannonier. He did seem to have his foot on the gas pedal a little more in this fight than he did in his previous fight against Shara Bullet, which I did appreciate. Because in that one he was really, really picking his moments carefully for when he would blitz in like he does, right? He blitz in, lands maybe a 2-punch combo or sometimes just single shots and then gets out of there quickly, right? And then does his thing, circles around, maybe throws some kicks, throws a flying knee, and then it's just kind of rinse and repeat and just keeps frustrating these guys, right? So when he knocked down Jared Cannonier in that first round, it was really impressive. It happened so fast that I had to wait to the replay to see if he really did catch him clean, or did he kind of just blitz in and almost kind of shove him down like he has a tendency to do also. But no, it was a clean shot, knocked him down. Really started to frustrate Jared Cannonier, particularly in the first 2 rounds. But Jared Cannonier had some moments in that third round I'll talk about in a moment. But I was really impressed with Michael Venom Page's ability to defend the takedown. There were times when Jared Cannonier was trying to clinch with him against the fence, trying to work some sort of a takedown, whether it be from body lock. I know he tried to drop down to like double leg on occasion, right? And really, Michael Venom Page was able to defend that in those first 2 rounds, and with not a whole lot of effort on his part. And it's interesting because Michael Venom Page, he's not the most muscular definition, defined guy, but man, is he big, right? Because in my mind, I think of Jared Cannonier as just this like monster, right? And MVP, he's tall and he's big and he's pretty powerful. And one thing about his game that doesn't get talked about a lot is just his ability himself to get a body lock and toss these guys to the ground, or blitz in and land a shot and then almost kind of like forearm shove them. And a guy as big and powerful as Cannonier to do that to him, really impressive. I know people have kind of mixed reactions about MVP's fights because he does dart in and out. He'll land shots, single shots, or maybe a couple, two-punch combos, and then he gets out, right? So there's these long gaps of time when he's coming in and out, right? So like he'll go in and you think like, okay, we got some action now, and then there'll be this like long break in the action, right, where his opponent is trying to track him down around the octagon, and then he'll just keep circling and circling and circling, but it works for him, and he's found a lot of success with it. Now in that third round, though, and this is always a risk with MVP when he does blitz in. If his opponents are able to time it right, and especially if it's in the center of the octagon where there's all that space to work with, which is exactly what happened. Cannonier, was able to get a body lock and was able to get him to the ground, and eventually, and there was times when he had, I believe, like full mount, and he was trying to work like a Kimura. I would have preferred to see Cannonier just really he was really trying to work like a choke or like a submission. It seemed. As good as his ground and pound is, he really should have just abandoned any idea of a submission. Because again, MVP is strong, and he has shown an ability to defend submissions and chokes pretty well. But one thing about Cannonier, most guys are not going to be able to defend that ground and pound. When he starts raining down those shots from top position, they do damage. And there were some shots he was landing. And, MVP, he was doing a good job of shifting his body around and trying to avoid most of the big shots, or he was just, clinching or, holding him close. But there was some elbows he was landing, but he just couldn't land consistently enough to damage him. But that was his opportunity. He had an opportunity right there to really start raining down some heavy ground and pound. And once Jared Cannonier does that, there's always that risk of the opponent getting out of there, right? And being finished, being put away, because his ground and pound is really some of the best in the game. But credit to MVP, because he was able to continue to move, maneuver around, avoid the submissions, avoid any kind of threat of a choke, and he was able to survive that third round. And I had it the same as the judges, clear 29-28 victory, for Michael Venom Page. So good win for him. I really want to see him start to put it together enough to where he can start finishing guys, because the speed is there, the power is there. He's got those flying knee capability also, so it's all there for him. I hope that we start to get to the point where we start to see him start to finish and put some of these guys away. He has expressed that he's not done at 170, so we might see him bounce back and forth. Is he ever going to be champion? Probably not. But, he does present a unique puzzle for his opponents to solve. You can put him in any of those matchups within the top 10 in welterweight or middleweight, and it's going to be a great fight, just stylistically, because he presents so many weird looks and such a unique puzzle to be solved for him. So whatever they do with him, whether it be at 170 or 185, I'm all for. He is going to steal now Cannonier's number 9 ranking. So insert him right in the top 10 in middleweight. And we just saw last weekend Fluffy Hernandez get a very impressive victory over Roman Dolidze, right? So, you throw him in the mix there too. Man, middleweight is so fun right now. Welterweight and middleweight, I think, are probably my two favorite divisions right now, as far as just how stacked the division are. There's some other good ones too, don't get me wrong, but man, it's so fun to see all these guys, where guys in their prime and guys still having success, and we're not seeing like these same, few guys that just continue to hang around. We're seeing a nice mixture of old blood and new blood. but a lot of new blood in those divisions, and there's so many fun matchups to be had. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they do with Michael Venom Page at 185 or 170. Good victory, good solid victory for him. Okay, guys, moving on to the third fight of the night, Carlos Prates versus Jeff Neal. Very impressive victory for Carlos Prates, finishing Jeff Neal, a guy that had never been knocked out before, right? We have seen him get finished before. I think before that, he recently got finished, or his most recent finish, I should say, in a losing effort was when he fought Shavkat Rakhmonov, and he got that standing choke, I believe, and finished Jeff Neal, but not a guy that had ever been finished with strikes on the feet. So the fact that he was able to do this was really impressive. A couple things I noticed, an adjustment-wise, that Carlos Prates had made from his previous fight with Ian Machado Gary to this evening's fight against Jeff Neal. He was much more aggressive. I don't know about you guys, but in the Ian Machado Gary fight, he just continued to, he was marching forward and trying to track down Ian Machado Gary a lot. He just continued to be on the hunt, but just continued to march forward with his just arms to his side. And we know he does kind of throw those big power shots, from the hip and from the side, and they are very effective. But for those first few rounds in the Ian Machado Gary fight, it just looked like he was just waiting for just that perfect opportunity that almost came. I mean, well, I should say did happen in that final round where he almost got him out of there. But up until that point, he was just something he was waiting while Ian Machado Gary was just sticking and moving, throwing kicks, throwing punches, throwing jabs, right? And he was just, stacking up round after round after round. That was not his game plan this time. He was aggressive. He went in to the danger zone of Jeff Neal. He really didn't have a ton of respect as far as, what Jeff Neal would be throwing in his direction in terms of the strikes. And Jeff Neal was landing, right? And that first round was pretty close. If it had actually ended, I would have scored it for Carlos Prates, right? But we know that Prates got that finish in like the final few seconds of that round. But, both guys landing. I think that Prates, even before the knockout, was landing the heavier shots. But Jeff Neal had his moments too, and so it looked like we were in for a 3-round war. And I remember the final few seconds of that fight were winding down, and then I stood up for a second, and me and my buddies were watching it, and we were getting ready to go, just head to the kitchen, get something to eat, something to drink, and then all of a sudden Carlos Prates out of nowhere throws this spinning back elbow. It lands clean right on the side of Jeff Neal's head. Flatlines him, lays him out. It was timed beautifully, and sometimes there's almost this, it seems like this gentleman's agreement between two fighters when, you get to the last few seconds and, there's quite a bit of distance between them, and, they just kind of look at each other and say, okay, well, we're just gonna pause this and then resume in round 2, right? And so I think he might have caught Jeff Neal off guard just a little bit, but hey, the round's not over till it's over. So I love the spinning elbow. It was effective, and it wasn't wild. It wasn't anything like, this kind of like Hail Mary, just low percentage, attempt. It was intentional. He threw it with purpose, and he landed it cleanly and beautifully. After the fight, Carlos Prates, gets on the mic, and he's talking bonus, and man, he's so good on the mic, right? And just another good, one of these just killers from the Fighting Nerds gym, right? He's incredibly fun to watch. He's a guy that just carries big power. I think back to that fight against the Leech, when those shots, I mean, you could hear those shots when he flatlined the Leech. And I remember just watching him just throw these bombs from the hip, and I hear them land and connect, and I'm like, man, those are some of the cleanest, loudest shots I've ever heard. And so this guy carries some serious power. He's going to present a problem to anybody he faces. And again, we just talked about middleweight, right? Welterweight, so stacked right now, so fun, so exciting. A lot of strikers, a lot of guys with heavy hands. And now he impressively finishes Jeff Neal, again, a guy that's never been finished on the feet. this was the kind of victory he needed. He needed a performance like this after the Ian Machado-Gary fight, right? We needed to see him step on the gas a little bit more. Check that box, right? We needed to see him be aggressive, but also be strategic in his shot selection, right? Check that box, right? He was also doing some really nice things with his kicks. Loved it. Put away a guy that's never been put away with strikes. So very impressive on Carlos Prates. He's going to move on. He's going to be in some meaningful fights in the welterweight division. I know he's got the title on his mind. Right now, welterweight is so stacked, it's really hard to feel like there's any of these guys at welterweight that's going to have these long reigning title runs because it's so stacked, right? I mean, we got Islam Makhachev coming in and fighting JDM, right? We have guys like Carlos Prates, Ian Machado-Gary, Sean Brady, Michael Morales. Like, there's so many. And, we're waiting on the return of Shavkat still. He's there. Joaquin Buckley. I mean, there's so many fun, exciting matchups, and the talent pool is so stacked at 170. So it's really hard for me to say Prates or any of these guys. Not that he's not capable of getting that title, right? I feel like any of these guys in any given night could beat each other, right? But man, the potential matchups are just make your eyes just get big, right? When you think about all these fun potential matchups that could be. And off the top of my head, I don't know who Michael Morales is booked or who is looking to get booked against. I'll have to take a look at that. But just off the top of my head, I mean, and putting aside who's already booked and not booked, I thought of that earlier. Man, how fun would a Carlos Prates, Michael Morales fight be? Two dynamic young strikers, right? And because you feel like one of those guys could kind of like take the other's shine, right? Carlos Prates has got a lot of shine lately being on the Fighting Nerds team, but Michael Morales has been making some noise too, and he's a guy that also carries heavy hands, big power. I think that'd be a pretty cool matchup to see. I would love to see them fight. If not next, definitely at some point in the future. Okay, guys, we move on. Lerone Murphy, co-main event, guys. Lerone Murphy versus Aaron Pico. This one was... So let's talk about some things before we get into the actual fight, okay? So originally Aaron Pico was slated to fight Movsar Evloev. And when they announced that fight, I was very surprised. I was very surprised that they were throwing him into the deep end that quickly. And I know some of you might make the argument, oh, Movsar, he doesn't finish anybody. That was a good match for Pico. Guys, Movsar is very skilled. He's honestly one of the most skilled in that division. I mean, as far as skill-wise, I'm not talking about his finishing ability, anything like that, but just in terms of all the different problems and challenges he presents for his opponents. He's dangerous on the ground. He's dangerous on the feet. There's not really any place he can go where he feels like he's at a disadvantage, right? Similar to Volk. But I was very surprised that they were throwing him into the deep end that quickly because Aaron Pico is a guy that came into Bellator. Now, Bellator is no more. It's all PFL, right? But came into Bellator as this young prodigy, almost very hyped young prospect, but almost just like a shoo-in. Like, this guy's going to be the next thing, right? And a lot of it had to do with his power, which was on display today, but also what everyone was always saying about him was just his tremendous ability to wrestle, right? I think at one point he was like high school wrestler of the year, national wrestler of the year, all these American wrestling credentials, which I've talked about on my previous videos, and I still stand by this. Guys, in 2025, American wrestling credentials as it relates to success in MMA at the highest level in the UFC, doesn't mean a whole lot. If that's what you're leaning on, if that's your path to success, if you're coming in the UFC and saying, hey, my style and my way to win is American wrestling, and maybe I'll throw in some striking here and there, you're gonna hit your ceiling pretty quick. And while Aaron Pico clearly has skills beyond that was on display. That's what you heard about initially when he entered the Bellator. And, he lost his debut in Bellator, and then he strung together some wins. He was consistent, but also kind of inconsistent in terms of what the expectations were of him, right? Because the expectations were championship. This guy's going to be he's the next guy. He's the next big thing. And Bellator wanted to highly promote him and, make him one of the faces, right? But it just didn't work out in Bellator, right? And I look back at his time in the PFL and Bellator, and I just don't quite understand what he's accomplished that warrants him an instant crack at the top 5, top 10, or even top 15. He was not a champion in Bellator or PFL. Now, there have been guys that were at one point champions or current champions in a different promotion that have come over and given like either a number one contender shot or sometimes even a championship, like Kaya Sakura against Pantoja. But Kaya Sakura was also a champion coming over, so you could kind of make that argument. Okay, he was champion in another promotion, pretty high level promotion. We'll see how it goes. But Aaron Pico, when I hear people talk about him currently, I just keep hearing about all this ability, all this promise, all this potential, and he's got all these skills, and he's this in the gym, he's that in the gym, he's doing this to this guy in the gym, and I hear about ability, I hear about potential and promise and all these things, but has it translated to meaningful wins and losses to the point where he is deserving to fight somebody like Lerone Murphy or Movsar Evloev? Well, let's take a look at that, okay? So guys, before Aaron Pico was made his debut this evening, his last 3 fights were wins, right? So let's talk about the last 3 guys he fought and beat, okay? So his last victory was about a year ago in February, and it was against Henry Corrales. He finished him in the first round with strikes, okay? So guys, Henry Corrales is currently 39 years old. So, okay, take that back about a year ago, makes him 38 years old, right? And on a 2-fight losing streak currently, right? Last fought was that Aaron Pico fight about a year ago. Okay, guys. So, 38-year-old guy, 21 wins, 8 losses, 2-fight losing streak. Okay, that was his most recent victory. Okay, before that, Pedro Carvalho. Let's talk about Pedro Carvalho. So he got finished also in the first round by Aaron Pico with strikes. Okay, so Pedro Carvalho is currently 13 wins, 10 losses, and is currently on a 4-fight losing streak. Okay, and then his other victory on his previous 3-fight win streak, James Gonzalez, got a unanimous decision victory. Okay, James Gonzalez, 35 years old. Okay, fair enough. Okay, record of 11 wins, 8 losses. Who has also lost 3 out of his last 4 fights. Okay. So, that is Aaron Pico's most recent body of work in terms of victories. I'm not sure why we're doing this. Now, make no mistake about it. I have no problem with Aaron Pico being in the UFC. I think he's a great addition to the UFC. In terms of matchmaking and opportunities, I'm really not sure why we're throwing him in there with Lerone Murphy or Movsar what has he recently done that would warrant such matchmaking? I mean, you can make the argument that just for some parity, right? Want to insert a new guy. He's a young guy. Throw him in the mix. But to go as high as fighting a number 6 ranked contender, yeah, I just don't know about that. And I think that the UFC kind of did him a disservice doing so. I mean, you could have thrown him in there with a guy in the bottom 10 to 15, but really, like, I'm not sure what he's recently accomplished that warrants him any fight in the top 15. Going into this fight, I mean, I think it would have been better for him to fight a guy outside the top 15. Maybe just right outside the top 15. See how he does. Give him just that initial experience, that kind of breaking in period, right? Because the lights are much brighter in the UFC than in any of those other promotions, PFL included. But what do they do instead? They give him Lerone Murphy, number 6 ranked contender. So now, guys, let's talk about the fight. So we know how this one ended, right? Lerone Murphy finished him with a spinning back elbow in 3 minutes, 21 seconds into the first round. Okay. But what happened before that? Because I've been hearing a lot of people online and seeing this talk about, like, well, what happened before that? What happened before he got flatlined, right? Because make no mistake about it, guys, he got put out bad. I mean, that was a bad knockout. I mean, there was no controversy there. He was out cold. He came in very aggressive, got right in Lerone Murphy's face, which was smart. It was a smart game plan in terms of not allowing him to manage that distance, right? He's going to get in his face. He's going to make it dirty. He's going to make it ugly. He's going to use his striking and mix in the takedowns, right? Make him uncomfortable. Not let him dance around, and stick and move like he did to Josh Emmett in that impressive victory, right? He just stuck and moved, circled, right? Stick and move, right? Aaron Pico was not going to let that happen. So he gets in his face, gets in there real quick, lands some good shots. I will say I was pretty impressed with his striking and his power. He looked really big, too, for the weight class. I will say, like, he came in looking really, really big. And you could see that. He landed there was a particular body shot I remember him landing where I was like, oh, man. And so, he initially was making Lerone Murphy, pretty uncomfortable. Because, again, Lerone Murphy's a guy that loves to manage distance, stick and move, really choose when he engages in those crazy exchanges, right, and closes distance. He's very particular about when he engages with him in that danger zone, right? So, but what happens? Aaron Pico takes him down twice. And this kind of goes back to my criticism of some of these, like, American wrestling credentials, right? Like, I mean, and forgive me because I'm not too familiar with Lerone Murphy's wrestling credentials himself, but I don't know that he has the wrestling credentials that Aaron Pico does. But yet, while he did get taken down, he got up instantly, both times. Aaron Pico didn't do anything with those takedowns. Now, could you argue that, by the threat of the takedown, it's going to make his striking more meaningful and impactful? Yeah, of course, right? I've said that before, you throw in the threat of the takedown, it throws guys off. I mean, look at the main event, right? I mean, should we say no more, right? But Lerone Murphy was able to escape those takedowns pretty quickly, and honestly, because when I hear about all this crazy ability, man, the wrestling ability. This guy's an animal. He's a marauder. He mauls these guys, right? I did think, because of that, going into this fight, that, man, if he is able to take down Lerone Murphy, I think he'd probably be able to. I assumed, based on what I've heard about Aaron Pico, that he'd be able to control him, right? Maybe land some ground and pound, maybe work a submission. Who knows, right? But at least get some meaningful control time under his belt. There was none of that. Lerone Murphy gets up quick both times. And then I believe there was a moment when he went to go for another takedown, or it might have been actually the second takedown. Lerone Murphy tried to sink in a choke. He wasn't in a great position to do that, and he ended up just kind of falling backwards, right? But up on his feet he goes again, and there's a little bit of a break, if I recall, and they're exchanging, and he gets Lerone Murphy against the fence again, which again, it's a good game plan. He's sticking to it, right? But he marches forward with his hands down to his side, right? And it's kind of like, I'm not sure what he was doing, if he was looking to shoot another takedown or loading up to, fire a shot. But he took probably like 2-3 steps in very close distance with his hands down, and he's like doing this, and he gets caught in this thing where it's almost like, oh, okay, am I gonna throw a shot here, or am I gonna shoot for a takedown, right? And when I rewatched it over and over and over again, I realized like how obvious that probably was for like Lerone Murphy to be like, oh man, like in the moment, like this is wide open for me, so I'm gonna take this guy's head off with my elbow. Like, make no mistake about it, guys. That was an intentional thrown elbow, spinning elbow. That wasn't some, oh man, I need to, just throw something flashy, just for kicks and, try to get some respect back. No, like, he saw that opening. He saw that opening and he took full advantage of it. And that's just one of those things, guys, and we talk all the time about how there's levels, right? That was a bad look. When the arms dropped and he takes about 2 or 3 steps in, he's kind of doing this little like shimmy kind of thing, and Lerone Murphy just spins and just pops him right, looked like forehead, temple area, and that was all she wrote, and with a follow-up shot for good measure. So Aaron Pico loses his UFC debut, and But what do you do with this now, right? Well, because guys, I'm not really into this whole moral victory thing, and I have a hard time with it. I'm already seeing a lot of this on social media. Like, oh well, he was looking great until he got knocked out. Well, guys, that's not that happens quite a bit. That's nothing that is an anomaly, and we've seen this with other guys, and we've gotten to this point now where guys can be on 3-fight losing streaks, and you'll hear media people or guys on social media, or guys on the YouTube channel saying like, "Oh yeah, but he was competitive. He's competitive in every fight, and especially if there's these guys that are ranked, it's almost like it's this pass to continue to keep them in a ranked position, right? And that's always been the issue I've had with someone like Michael Chandler, who is now, 2-5 or something like that in the UFC, right? I mean, in what world should you be ranked? 2-5? I have a hard time with that. But then the argument you always hear, right, is, oh, well, he's competitive in every fight. And, he was looking great until this. He was looking great until that. Guys, if it doesn't translate to a victory, it doesn't mean much, okay? Now, the only exception to that is if a guy's just getting dominated for 5 rounds, and then some guy throws some low percentage, crazy, Hail Mary, haymaker shot, or some sort of, sloppy spinning elbow, and then steals a victory. I mean, sure, yeah, then I get it. You can make an argument for that guy that was looking great for 4 rounds and 4 minutes and 50 seconds until some guy threw just this Hail Mary whatever, right? Sure, but when does that ever happen, right? Because guys are just too good these days. Guys know when they can sense the finish line, how to avoid damage, how to avoid things like that, how to avoid these last-minute crazy Hail Mary attempts at some crazy strike to get him out. So I have a hard time with that. And now I'm already seeing these things online. Aaron Pico, oh, he was looking so good. He was looking so good until he got knocked out. Guys, the bottom line is he got knocked out in the first round. That's what it comes down to. Now, were there some things that he did well? Yeah, of course there was. Sure. But when we're looking at future matchmaking for him now, he needs to be outside the top 15. Sure, you can give him a guy that's in that, right there, right outside the top 15. I have no issue with. I've just shown you his last 3 victories. Okay. I'm willing to bet that most of you don't even know who those guys are. Okay. And I will admit, I had to do a little research on those guys myself before this video. Okay. Those last 3 victories, while I think 2 of them were finishes, level of competition matters, guys. And there is nothing that he has done recently that warranted him fighting Lerone Murphy or Movsar Evloev. Getting knocked out in the first round does not warrant another fight in the top 15. He needs to be looking outside the top 15 now. He's 28 years old, still has plenty of time to iron out those wrinkles. And he can still make some noise, but I look at those things. I look at the last 3 victories, and everything leading up to this fight, and I just don't understand why this booking was even made. But Lerone Murphy, this was what he needed. He needed a finish. He needed a knockout, because he got a lot of slack and a lot of heat from the fans after he fought Josh Emmett because of the constant sticking and moving and circling, right, and not wanting to engage with Josh Emmett in any kind of close distance, striking. And I think with a finish like this, I think the UFC is going to look at this now and say, okay, now we got some juice behind him a little bit. Because Lerone Murphy, he's been around a while and has been in the top 10 for a while, but for a long time never really was a guy that was looked at as like, oh man, could you throw him in the championship? Could you look, even though being an undefeated fighter, he wasn't really getting those considerations. So he really needed this knockout. And I love the fact that, he got on the mic, called for it, right? And I love after the Josh Emmett victory that he leaned into the hate. He leaned into the boos. Too many times when these guys have a more strategic kind of path to victory that's maybe not so fan-friendly, the boos rain down. A lot of them kind of have like this, oh, shucks attitude, right? Like, oh, yeah, sorry, guys, I wanted to get the finish, but this, and then the boos keep coming and the hate still keeps coming. So you might as well lean into it. So I love that Lerone Murphy leaned into all that hate last time. It was kind of like, yeah, okay, what? Keep going. Yeah, what? I don't care. I don't care what you guys think. Yeah, I'm going to win how I want to win. Ian Machado Gary does the same thing, right? There's guys that just don't care how they win as long as they win. They don't care if it's flashy. They don't care if it's fan-friendly, right? They just want to get the win. That being said, though, if you have that approach, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get to a title shot. So that's why this spinning elbow knockout flatline of Aaron Pico was exactly what he needed, because now it looks like we could be getting a Lerone Murphy versus Alexander Volkanovski matchup in December. That's an interesting matchup. Okay, guys, we get to what was supposed to be the crown jewel of the evening, Khamzat Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis. There's not a whole lot to analyze in this fight. And even as I try to go through it round by round, and on the drive home from my buddy's house, I was kind of like thinking back, like, okay, in this round, and trying to differentiate, right, in my head and in my brain and my memory what happened round by round. And like the whole fight just kind of felt like one big long round of a rinse and repeat. Because what happened in round 1, happened in round 2, happened in round 3, happened in round 4, happened in round 5, up until the very end, which we will talk about. But Khamzat Chimaev uses his very, very, very dominant wrestling abilities from round 1 to 5 to dominate Dricus du Plessis. That's what he did. And I'm already seeing online a lot of hate. Oh, this was a boring fight. Oh, this is the most boring fight I've ever seen. Oh, this is a boring champion. Oh, man. And guys, I'm not going to necessarily disagree with that a whole lot. Do I think it was the most boring fight ever? Like, no, I don't. Would I have loved to see a little more action on the feet? Yeah, of course. Of course. I think there could have been some really interesting striking exchanges. But here's the thing, guys. When you have a style that you are that dominant in implementing fight after fight after fight after fight, with slight, variations of degrees of success, right? Like we think of the Gilbert Burns fight, right? Had some resistance there. Usman put up a valiant effort. But by and large, no one's been able to stop Khamzat Chimaev's wrestling. And I don't know if anybody will be able to. We've seen this from the lower tier guys in the UFC to now the champion, Dricus du Plessis. Khamzat Chimaev was a guy that made a big splash initially during COVID, when all the fights were at the apex. He had like that one, that 2-fight streak where it was like back-to-back weekends, I think. I want to say it was like John Phillips and Reese McGee, I think. He was like, and then I know he fought Mearshart, or it might have been, that two and not the other, but he had this, crazy 2-3 fight streak where it was like, 3 fights in X many days, or like back-to-back fights, back-to-back weekends. And, with the exception of the Mearshart fight, which he got him out there with that boom, quick one strike, John Phillips and, Reese McGee, his first 2 fights, I believe, he was just same thing. Dominating in the wrestling, right? Could not stop it. No defense for it, right? And we have just seen him just continue to implement that same thing, fight after fight, as he has continued to climb the ranks. But guys, when you have a style that's that dominant, why would you do anything different? Which is hard for us as fans, right? Because we want to see these guys mix it up, right? We want to see, spectacular knockouts. We want to see the striking exchanges, right? Of course. For me, some of the best part of the sport is seeing those high-level striking exchanges between 2 high-level fighters. And while Khamzat has good striking, respectable striking, has some sneaky power, he knows where he can't be stopped. So it did not surprise me that at any point he didn't decide to abandon that. When you're having that much success, guys, why would you? Right? Dricus just had no answer for the wrestling. Made it a little interesting there at the end. We'll talk about that. But he had no answer. He was very confident in the press conference that he was going to be able to just get back up. He said that. Yeah, he's going to take me down, but I'm going to get right back up. Not only did he not get right back up, how many times did he get put in mounted crucifix? My goodness. Guys, this was the UFC middleweight champion of the world getting put in mounted crucifix with little resistance over and over and over again, and being controlled, taken down. Dricus said it himself. it's like he knew what my next move was going to be every time, and he had an answer for it before I even started. Was it the most fan-friendly victory? No, it wasn't. But we can't deny that it was a very, very dominating performance. Dricus, while had multiple attempts to try to escape, he looked like a fish out of water. There was times when I thought almost that Khamzat was like dragging this out intentionally, because he was getting every position that he wanted in the wrestling with such ease that it was like, okay, you must be able to just sink in some sort of choke at this point, right? Because it was just effortless on his part. And, you know, he's had a lot of criticisms over not being able to last multiple rounds, right? I can't tell you how many people I heard going into this fight saying, oh, well, after 2 rounds, Chimaev's done. After 3 rounds, Chimaev's done. After 1 round, Chimaev's done. Looked pretty good to me tonight. Is that due to him changing camps? He has a new conditioning coach. They're trying some different things. Yeah, who knows? But he went 5 rounds tonight, and man, he sure looked good. Said he had no injuries after it. Said he's ready to go back in October. Man, I hope so. And I will say it's encouraging now that we have him fighting in the United States, right? That was a big hurdle for a while, which is why I think kind of contributed to some of his lack of activity. So hopefully we get an active champion. But before we get to what's next for him, when I was watching these first 2 rounds of this fight, it almost seemed like, based on Dricus and his coach's behavior, and they're looking at each other during the round, smiling, and Dricus is, after the round, he's going back to the stool, smiling, and, he's just kind of like, oh, okay, like whatever. I'm starting to think that maybe in those first 2 rounds, the game plan was, well, we're going to let him wrestle. We're not going to offer a ton of resistance with the takedowns. We're going to let him wear himself out. Because you did start to see a little bit more success in those 4th and 5th rounds, but then you started to see some frustration from Dricus as the fight was slowly slipping away from him. Well, I guess not slowly, very rapidly, I should say, slipping away from him. Because he did show in that last round that he still had plenty of power there. He still had plenty of physical capabilities there. He was started to defend a takedown, I think, and then both had body locks, and it was kind of like they were fighting over, that dominant position to work a takedown from the body lock, right? But Dricus ends up on top. And so first I was like, okay, is he gassed, or is he just failed game plan? Because he was able to take him down with the body lock in that last round, ended up on top, and then Khamzat really made it kind of a silly decision to give up his back, which we know Dricus has some sneaky chokes and some, I shouldn't say sneaky, high level submission ability when he's got that, the body lock from the back position. And there was a moment where he had it sunk in, just like how he got Izzy. And he kind of fell off position to the side and just was not able to readjust. And Khamzat very, very wisely, grabs that wrist and he said, nope, I'm just going to chill right here and I'm the new champ. But guys, now we have Khamzat, new champ. it should be anticipated and expected that Khamzat is going to continue to try to defeat his opponents using his dominating wrestling. He's masterful at it. It's world class. It's above world class. It's even as far as, we always talk about like the Dagestani wrestlers, even on their standards, he is a cut above that. It is that good. There was part of me that thought that maybe Dricus was going to be able to be too strong for him. Like he was going to be able to defend the takedowns, and even if he was able to get him down, he was going to be able to reverse position somehow and use his strength. It just didn't happen. But guys, Khamzat is doing this to the best fighters in the world. It is a dominating style when he implements it. Unfortunately for us as fans, it's not the most exciting thing to see. I would like to see him getting back to his implementation of ground and pound, which was on full display early in his UFC run, right? I mean, he would take guys down. I think it was Reese McGee. He took his back, put his hooks in, and then he's just like posturing up and just raining down, pop, 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 and you can hear those shots. And I remember thinking when I was watching, man, these shots are powerful, right? I mean, he was a guy that instantly looked like he could be something special in that early run. Because guys, we know that, Khamzat isn't one of these guys that just wants to ride out and get decision victories, right? He wants finishes, right? I mean, he looks for it. He's always looking to finish. And I think it's a testament to Dricus that he was able to, even through the complete domination, he was still able to keep himself out of a lot of trouble. As much as I would love to say like a rematch would go differently, or like, man, well, what about this? What about that? Even the moments when Dricus had an opportunity, it was really just more because a poor decision from Khamzat, right? It was a poor decision to give up his back in that last minute and a half or whatever it was. That wasn't a smart decision. Because initially, right before he slipped off, I remember thinking, because it was that same lock. He holds his grip a little bit different when sinking in that choke. It's different, and it's perfect for him because he's so powerful, right? And I feel like it allows him more leverage to really not just sink in the choke, but really put a lot of force behind it, right? Like a bone crushing kind of grip, and he had that. There was a moment where he had that. He had the body lock, and then he sunk in the choke, and it looked just like how he had Izzy right before he rolled over and then finished him. And I remember thinking, like, he's gonna pull this off. He's gonna pull this out of his you-know-what and submit him. And he nearly had it, but got off balance, fell to the side, couldn't readjust at that point. So valiant effort on his end, didn't give up, didn't throw in the towel, didn't quit on himself. How many guys can we say really would have continued to have the mental sharpness and toughness to continue to not give up on themselves after being just dominated round after round after round like that? After the fight, Dricus was all class on the mic, as he usually is. But he's gonna have to do some work now to get a rematch, because this fight is not gonna warrant an instant rematch from Dricus. So he's got some work to do in a very, very stacked middleweight division. So we will see what happens, but it's going to take something special. It's going to take something special to dethrone Hamzat. Which guy is it going to come from? I don't know. That's tough. Could it be Renier de Ridder? Based on what we saw, the issue is based on what we saw tonight, any of these guys I'm going to list, you could see this fight going the same way. It's going to be Nasruddin Imavov. Based on what I saw tonight, probably not. Kyle Braulio. Okay, maybe. But who can you really say, like, oh, that's going to be the guy? And guys, one last thing I'm going to say about the victory tonight from Hamzat. There's so much complaining, and as I'm sure there will be, about his game plan and the style that led him to the victory tonight. A lot of control time, right? Not a ton of damage. Some good striking and ground and pound mixed in with the wrestling in those middle rounds in particular, right? But not too much heavy-handed striking, not a lot of submission attempts, but the constant pressure. And like Dricka said, the wet blanket just being dragged down over and over and over and over again. Guys, is that fun to watch? Especially if it doesn't eventually lead to a finish? No, not particularly. But for all of you out there that are criticizing, Hamzat and saying, "Oh man, this is so boring. It's the boringest thing I've ever seen." Okay. It's on his opponents to formulate some sort of meaningful defense. It's on his opponents to stop the takedown. That is the argument. Okay. If you guys don't like his takedowns, the other guy should stop the takedowns. That's what it comes down to. And if you can't, that is not the other guy's fault. That is not the opponent's fault. It is on your opponent to formulate defense. It is not on any fighter to abandon a highly successful game plan that is tried and true, tested, repeated, found success, to just abandon that and saying, you know what, I'm just going to start striking, because it's more exciting for the fans. Even though it is more exciting for the fans in most cases. But to abandon a game plan that is successful time and time and time and time again at now the highest level, it's not on him to abandon that for the sake of entertaining anybody. Does that make it fun for us sometimes? No. And I will say, guys, and I am with you on this, it was kind of a bummer way to end the night, because we had those two back-to-back spinning elbow knockouts. We had the Tim Elliott comeback finish, right? We had a kind of a technical thriller, so to say, in MVP versus Cannonier, right? And so, but particularly with those two back-to-back spinning elbow knockouts, and then it was like, I remember after Lerone Murphy knocked out, Pico, me and my buddy, we were all like, whoa, man, this is great. And then, we're so hyped, and then we're like, all right, man, time for the main event. And you just felt like it was just like, okay, this is going to be a perfect way to, end the night, right? It's going to be something special that's going to happen, something just like, whoa, mind-blowing, right? And even though it was a dominating performance, it was kind of like, kind of took the air out of the building almost, right? So I am with you guys as a fan. Yes, would I have loved to see a more entertaining fight? Would I have loved to see them mix it up on the feet anymore? Or, more than what we saw? Yeah, of course. I would have loved that. But there's just no way I'm going to hold that against Hamzat. Like, if I'm in his shoes, I mean, come on, right? That's just the comes and goes of the sport, right? We're going to get highlight, next level, knockout, crazy finishes. And then we're going to get fights like this also, right? But isn't that also kind of what's so great about the sport, right? Is that we're never sure what to expect. How many of you out there, including myself, if someone were to tell me, oh, this fight's going the distance 5 rounds, how many of you, including myself, would have said, oh, that's DDP then? DDP outlasted him. DDP outlasted the early onslaught and took it to him. That's exactly what I probably would have thought. So, we never know what we're going to get, right? So, we'll see what happens. The good news is, guys, is that there's so many new fresh contenders at middleweight that have not gotten a title shot yet. We're seeing a nice turnover at middleweight. And the new guys, the new crop is on the come up, right? Are any of them going to be able to dethrone Chimaev? Man, that's going to be a tall order, guys. I mean, based on what we saw tonight, a lot of people were picking Dricus tonight. It's going to take something special. It's going to take something special to dethrone Khamzat. Thanks for tuning in tonight, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Thanks for joining me on another episode of MMA After Dark. Take care.